Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We're back. So now we are in the teacher's tool, inshallah ta'ala session. The teacher's tool here, we're going to talk about how I used the information. I put my information on Note LM and how you will hear the explanation from Note LM. I tried to put together the two sources. The first source is the virtues and the rewards of the Quran. This is the text from here. The second source I put is the architecture of Islamic stability, behavior, and discipline. And this talks about the stability, consistency, and persistence. How does Islam teach us these? And these are the actual core productivity shift that we could add. Everybody is talking about these three principles, core principles for any productivity and any behavioral science even. Okay, so how does Islam deal with these concepts? And the second source was the text from here. So I copy pasted and put it as two sources. And then I asked it to produce the studio. So what is the product of this? It is merging the new scientific and neurological behaviors and how does it work, and how does this combine with the recitation of the Quran. So I combine those two concepts, a new concept with a new terminology, with the old concepts which comes from the hadith, which are the core concepts that we said that we need to anchor each time. Now, the merger of these two are even explaining the benefits of these hadith even more. Okay, so what are you going to see? I'm going to shift while you're hearing this. So this will be this is AI generated. It's a male and female voice. So these are not two people. They are AI generated. Okay. So there are male and female voice, and they will be explaining these two concepts together. I'll be shifting from the other product that it produced. It produced an infograph for me. Okay. I will be shifting through the infograph and pointing out the areas she's talking or they are talking about. And then there is also a PowerPoint here, okay, that it produced also using those concepts. So I'll go through them depending on what they are explaining. Okay, so I'll be shifting from here and here and here. Okay, I need you to put me on the chat if the voice is clear before I begin.
Imagine holding this.
Is this clear? Just tell me on the chat that it is clear, inshallah. Yes, okay. Let me continue then. Okay, let's begin from the beginning. They will be explaining. So this is Note LM, Notebook LM from Google. I combined those two things once more, the neurological and behavioral science, the new behavioral science, and combine them with this hadith to show how deep these hadiths are working in us, why we shouldn't use these anchors every time. Okay, she will be explaining and I'll be going back and forth. Okay.
Imagine holding this device designed by literally thousands of neuroscientists.
Right, with $1 billion budget.
Exactly, a massive budget, and it is specifically engineered to just completely shatter your attention span.
It's terrifying when you frame it like that.
It is. But now imagine fighting back with a behavioral practice that is, over 1,000 years old.
A completely different kind of technology.
Yeah, a spiritual technology. So today on the deep dive, we are looking at this incredibly unexpected collision. We're talking about classical Islamic spiritual texts meeting the modern crisis of dopamine addiction.
It's such a fascinating juxtaposition.
It really is, and we have a fantastic stack of sources in front of us to explore this today. One is a fairly modern, structured framework, and it's titled The Architecture of Islamic Stability and Modern Behavioral Discipline.
Okay, just a point once more. This is AI generated female and male voices. Okay. Okay, so I'll not go into controversies. Okay, let's go back 10 seconds again.
Sources in front of us to explore this today. One is a fairly modern, structured framework, and it's titled The Architecture of Islamic Stability and Modern Behavioral Discipline.
A very academic title, but incredibly practical content.
Super practical. And the other source is this rich, really beautiful compilation of classical Islamic texts detailing the virtues and rewards of Quranic recitation.
Right, so we are essentially taking 7th century spiritual directives and just laying them directly over 21st century cognitive science.
Which you'd think would clash, right?
You would think so. But rather than finding a mismatch, we're seeing this profound behavioral architecture. The goal here today isn't just to outline what these classical texts say. We want to understand the why.
The mechanics of it.
Exactly. We want to investigate the neurological and psychological mechanics of how these ancient rituals serve as highly effective countermeasures to the cognitive fragmentation we are all experiencing right now.
So if you're listening right now, whether you are actively looking to deepen a specific spiritual practice, or honestly, if you're just completely burned out by the constant pull of your smartphone and searching for a way to reclaim your focus.
Which is pretty much everyone today.
Right. If you want your attention span back, this deep dive is custom tailored for you. Okay, let's unpack this. To start, we really have to look at how these classical texts define the very act of reading itself.
It's a completely different paradigm.
It is. There is an Arabic term used in the sources, mutazabad bi tilawatihi, which translates roughly to the idea that the recitation itself is a direct act of worship.
Yes, the very act of vocalizing the words.
And I want to pause on that for a second because it fundamentally alters our modern relationship with what a book is. Because usually, we read to extract data, right?
That's the utilitarian approach.
Yeah. I read an email to know what time my meeting is. I read a news article to get the summary of an event. The value is entirely in the extraction of facts.
The text just becomes a disposable vehicle for information.
Yeah.
Once you have the data, you just discard the vehicle.
Right. I don't care about the font of the email once I know the meeting time.
Exactly. But mutazabad bi tilawatihi, it shifts the paradigm entirely. It posits that the physical, deliberate act of articulation,
Like actually moving your lips.
yes, moving the lips, engaging the vocal cords, hearing the sound of the words in the air, that is where the primary value lies. You aren't just scanning for the gist of a
You
story.
can't just skim it.
No, you are engaging in this phonetic and spiritual repetition.
Which actually changes how the brain processes the activity, doesn't it? Silent reading and vocalized reading, they don't use the exact same neural pathways.
They absolutely don't. Silent reading is highly efficient for data absorption, but vocalized reading, especially of a really complex, rhythmically structured text in a classical language, it actively recruits the motor areas of the brain.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it engages auditory feedback loops. So you've got Broca's area, which handles speech production, and Wernicke's area, which is responsible for language comprehension. Both are highly active simultaneously.
So it's like a full brain workout compared to just skimming a tweet.
Exactly. It forces a complete deceleration of thought because, like you said, you cannot skim a text you are vocally reciting. The classical framework, by designating the physical recitation as the act of worship, it essentially mandates this slow, focused, multisensory engagement.
Okay, that brings us to how the text historically motivated people to adopt this incredibly slow, difficult practice. Because they didn't have smartphones, but human nature is still human nature.
We've always struggled with discipline.
Right, and they motivated people using these incredibly vivid sensory metaphors. There is a very famous narration from Sahih Muslim where the Prophet Muhammad provides this four-part analogy, categorizing people based on their relationship with the Quran.
The citrus and the date analogy?
Yes, he compares a believer who recites the Quran to a sweet-smelling, sweet-tasting citrus fruit, like an orange.
What's fascinating here is this brilliant use of dual sensory mapping. Taste is an internal hidden experience, right?
Right, you can't just look at an orange and know it's sweet.
Exactly. You have to consume it to know. So in the metaphor, taste maps to the internal hidden state of the heart, the internal faith of the person. But smell, on the other hand, is an external emanation.
It fills the room.
Yes, it alters the environment around the object. So the fragrance maps to the observable external action of the recitation.
Right, because an orange literally projects its presence into the room before you even touch it or see it.
It has an aura.
But then the analogy shifts, which I love. A believer who doesn't recite is compared to a date. Now, a date is incredibly sweet, so that represents that intact internal faith, but it has almost no fragrance whatsoever.
The internal reality is totally intact, but the external, environmental benefit is absent. The text is making a really strong argument here that recitation isn't just a personal, private benefit.
It radiates.
Exactly. It creates a sort of spiritual and psychological aura that positively affects the surrounding space. And this becomes even clearer when you look at the negative examples in that same narration.
Oh, right, the hypocrite. Someone with no internal faith who nevertheless recites the text, they are compared to basil.
Right, sweet-smelling basil.
Yeah, it smells wonderful on the outside. It projects this really beautiful external aesthetic. But if you actually bite into a basil leaf on its own, it is sharply bitter.
The taste betrays the smell.
And finally, the hypocrite who doesn't even recite is compared to a colocynth, which is this desert plant that has no smell at all and a terribly bitter taste. What I find so striking here is the total reliance on universal, everyday human experiences.
You don't need a theology degree to understand it.
Exactly. You don't need a PhD to grasp the difference between a sweet orange and a bitter desert root.
It completely bypasses all that abstract theological jargon. It roots the spiritual taxonomy in immediate, undeniable sensory reality. And the texts use this strategy not just for categorizing people, but for valuation.
What do you mean by valuation?
Well, how do you convince someone of the value of an invisible spiritual reward? It's abstract, so you map it onto the highest value material asset they already understand.
Oh, which leads perfectly to the pregnant she-camels.
Yes, the camels.
This is from another narration where the prophet asks his companions if any of them would like to go out to the local valleys, specifically the valleys of Bhutan or Alaquik, and return every single morning with 3 large, fat, pregnant she-camels.
Which is quite the offer.
And obviously, they all say yes. Who wouldn't? He then tells them that reciting just 3 verses of the Quran in prayer is better than getting 3 camels. 4 verses are better than 4 camels.
To really grasp the psychological weight of this framing, we have to kind of strip away our modern urbanized worldview for a second. We hear the word camel and we think of like a zoo animal.
Right, or maybe a tourist ride on a vacation.
Yeah, exactly. But in the socioeconomic reality of 7th century Arabia, a large, fat, pregnant she-camel was the absolute apex of material wealth.
It's honestly hard to find a direct modern equivalent for us today.
It really is, because a camel in that specific harsh environment served multiple overlapping economic functions all at once.
It was everything.
It was premium transportation, it was a primary food source, providing continuous milk in a place where resources were incredibly scarce.
And it was pregnant.
Right, which makes it a self-replicating asset. It guaranteed future wealth. Plus, it carried immense social and tribal prestige. To own a herd of these was literally the equivalent to owning a thriving tech startup, a luxury vehicle, and a high-yield investment portfolio, all rolled into one biological asset.
So it's basically like telling someone listening today, hey, would you like to walk into your garage every single morning and find 3 brand new, fully loaded luxury sports cars with the titles sitting in the glove box.
It perfectly captures the magnitude of the offer, yes.
Yeah.
And by explicitly pointing to the valleys of Banhan and Al Kutik, which were the actual physical local markets where livestock was traded in Medina right down the road.
He made it local.
Very local. He grounded this abstract spiritual promise in their immediate, tangible commercial reality. The psychology here is just brilliant. He isn't dismissing their natural human desire for material wealth.
He's leveraging it.
Exactly. He is leveraging their profound understanding of material value to establish an entirely new metric of spiritual wealth.
And it completely reframes the effort involved. Because think about it, reading 3 verses takes maybe, 60 seconds?
Barely.
But by associating that 60 seconds of effort with the highest possible material payout imaginable, it dramatically alters the perceived return on investment for the habit.
Precisely. It creates this incredibly powerful motivational anchor. And the text continually reinforced this idea that this quiet, seemingly solitary act of reading in your room is actually an event of massive significance.
There is a story in the sources about Usaid bin Hudayr that really caught my attention on this point because it reframes the act of reading from this solitary, lonely event to a highly observed one.
It's a beautiful narrative.
It is. So Usaid is sitting in his courtyard late at night and he's reading the Quran. His horse is tied up nearby. And as he reads, the horse suddenly starts to panic. So Usaid stops reading and the horse calms down.
A very eerie setting.
Yeah, very atmospheric. He starts reading again and the horse panics again. This happens 3 times. His son, Yahya, is sleeping right near the horse, and Usaid gets worried the horse is going to trample the boy, so he just stops entirely. And when he looks up at the night sky, he sees this massive canopy of glowing lamps rising into the heavens until they vanish.
It's a very specific, detailed historical account.
Right. And the next morning, he goes and tells the Prophet what he saw. The Prophet explains that those glowing lamps were actually angels who had descended specifically to listen to his sweet recitation. And he even adds that if Usaid had just kept reading, the angels would have remained until morning, visible to everyone in the city.
If we look at the psychological mechanics of this narrative, it does something very important for habit formation. It shatters the illusion of isolation.
Oh, I like that phrase, the illusion of isolation.
Because when you are trying to build a difficult, slow habit, like reading a complex text late at night while everyone else is asleep, the isolation can be a massive deterrent. You feel like your effort just exists in a vacuum. No one sees it, no one is applauding you.
And we are so conditioned by modern social media to require an immediate audience for literally everything we do. If we do something difficult, like a hard workout or finishing a book, and we don't post about it, it almost feels like it didn't even happen.
Exactly. We inherently crave observation and validation. This classical narrative addresses that exact human psychological need, but it elevates the audience entirely. It suggests that the practitioner is never, ever alone.
The angels are there.
The effort does not exist in a vacuum.
Yeah.
It commands an audience of the highest cosmological order. The angels themselves are drawn to the acoustic reality of the recitation. It transforms what feels like a lonely, tedious struggle into a deeply communal, observed, and validated cosmic event.
But let me push back on something here, because this is important. All these rewards we've talked about, the fragrance of the orange, the camels, the angels descending, they all seem highly tailored to someone who is already an expert at this.
Someone with fluency.
Right. But what about the person who can barely read the Arabic? The person who stammers and mispronounces every third word? Because modern culture severely penalizes the beginner. The expert gets all the accolades, and the beginner just feels embarrassed and frustrated.
And this is where the classical text offers one of its most compassionate and honestly psychologically astute interventions. There is a specific narration from Sahih Muslim that directly addresses this. It states that the person who is proficient in the Quran is with the noble angels.
Which is great for the expert.
Right, but the person who falters, who struggles, and finds the recitation incredibly difficult, they receive a double reward.
Yeah, double reward. That completely subverts how we normally assign value to skill today.
It really does, because it shifts the entire metric of success from fluency to friction. In most modern disciplines, efficiency is literally the only thing that matters. How fast can you do it? How perfectly?
Yeah, we optimize everything.
But in this spiritual architecture, the struggle itself is considered an act of devotion. The person who falters is spending more time, they're exerting way more cognitive energy, and they are fighting through a much higher degree of psychological frustration than the expert is. The text explicitly recognizes and rewards that extra layer of friction.
I see the logic, but isn't there a risk that this kind of discourages mastery? Like if I get double the reward for being bad at it, why should I ever put in the effort to get better?
That's a fair question, but the theology accounts for it. Remember, the expert is placed with the noble angels, which implies a highly elevated state of being in proximity to the divine. The double reward for the beginner isn't meant to be a permanent incentive to stay ignorant.
So it's not a participation trophy forever.
No, it is a temporary subsidy. It's the spiritual equivalent of a grant given to a startup business just to get it off the ground. The initial phase of learning any new, complex skill is the period of highest abandonment. People quit when it feels too hard and they feel stupid.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
By doubling the psychological and spiritual payout during the exact phase of maximum friction, the behavioral architecture ensures the practitioner actually survives the learning curve.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. It's a built-in anti-abandonment mechanism. And speaking of keeping the habit alive, there is an analogy in these texts that I really, really want to dissect. It's the concept of the tied camel.
Ah, yes, Sahih al-Bukhari.
Right. The Prophet compares knowing the Quran to owning a tied camel. If you keep it tied, you control it. If you release the rope, it runs away. He even goes so far as to say the Quran is more prone to break away from human memory than a camel escaping its bind.
It's a very early, remarkably accurate description of memory degradation and what neuroscientists now call neuroplasticity.
But wait, a tied camel implies forced captivity, right? Is the text suggesting our relationship with these spiritual habits is supposed to feel restrictive, like we are just chaining something down against its will?
Not restrictive in the sense of imprisonment, but restrictive in the sense of deliberate, required maintenance. Think of a neural pathway in your brain, like a path through a dense jungle.
Okay, I'm visualizing it.
If you walk that path every single day with a machete, the path stays clear. You can walk it easily. But if you stop walking it for a month, the jungle reclaims it incredibly fast. The brain is ruthlessly efficient. It actively prunes synaptic connections that aren't being used just to save energy.
Use it or lose it.
Exactly. The classical text uses the image of the escaping camel because it perfectly captures the active aggressive nature of forgetting. You don't just passively lose the memorization over time. It actively fights to leave your mind if you don't continually reinforce the bonds through daily review.
Which raises the central tension of our entire conversation today. If the rewards are truly this massive, the sweet citrus, herds of luxury camels, angelic audiences, and double payouts just for struggling, and the maintenance instruction is basically just keep the camel tied by reviewing it daily.
Sounds simple on paper.
Right, but why are we failing at this so spectacularly today? Why do we sit down with a text like this and within 3 minutes our skin is literally crawling and we are desperate to check our phones?
Because we are no longer just dealing with natural, baseline human forgetfulness anymore, we are dealing with an active environmental untying of our camels. We have to transition here from looking at the ancient text to looking at the modern crisis. The difficulty we face today when we sit down to read is not a moral failing on our part.
It's not.
No, it is a neurobehavioral crisis driven by an attention economy that is fundamentally hostile to deep focus.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The text we are referencing, The Architecture of Islamic Stability and Modern Behavioral Discipline, it spends a lot of time diagnosing this. It argues that we simply cannot view our smartphones as neutral tools anymore. They are highly engineered environments.
Exactly. You are holding a device powered by platforms, TikTok, Instagram, X, that employ thousands of the brightest behavioral psychologists and neuroscientists on the planet.
People with PhDs from Stanford and MIT.
Right, and their explicit mandate, their job description, is to capture and commodify human attention. And the primary weapon they use to do this is something called the variable reward schedule.
Let's break that down because understanding the mechanism here is absolutely crucial. How exactly does a variable reward schedule work in our brains?
It is the exact same psychological mechanism utilized by slot machines in Las Vegas. If you pull a lever and get a guaranteed, predictable reward every single time, your brain actually habituates to it very quickly. Dopamine levels stabilize, and you eventually just get bored and walk away.
Because it's predictable.
Yes. But if you pull the lever and the reward is completely random, sometimes a massive payout, sometimes absolutely nothing, sometimes a minor payout, your brain cannot predict the future. This unpredictability throws your dopamine system into absolute overdrive.
Because the brain is desperately trying to figure out the pattern.
Yes. It's an evolutionary survival trait, hijacked for profit. Dopamine isn't just a pleasure chemical, which is a common misconception. It is the molecule of anticipation and motivation. When you open a social media app and start swiping, you don't know what the next video will be.
Right, it could be anything.
It might be incredibly funny, generating a high dopamine spike. It might be totally boring, generating a drop.
Yeah.
Because of the sheer randomness, your brain releases a massive surge of dopamine just in anticipation of the swipe.
Just moving your thumb releases it.
Exactly.
But what goes up must come down.
Rapidly. The dopamine spikes, and then it plummets way below your normal baseline, creating a temporary neurological deficit. This deficit physically manifests as a feeling of craving or mild agitated anxiety. And how do you fix that deficit?
You swipe again.
You swipe again, you enter an endless loop.
Yeah.
Anticipate spike, drop, crave, swipe.
I always compare it to feeding your brain junk food. Cheap, engineered dopamine is like eating a bag of chips, whereas deep reading is like sitting down for a complex, home-cooked meal. So when we transition away from the phone to do something slow, like reading a 1,000-year-old text, our brain is essentially in a state of chemical withdrawal.
Precisely. Long-form reading operates on a very slow, very subtle reward cycle. The Quran, for example, is deeply complex. It requires contemplation, it requires cross-referencing ideas in your mind, and sustained auditory and visual attention. It does not deliver a dopamine spike every 15 seconds.
No, definitely not.
So when you sit down to read it, after spending 2 hours on a hyper-stimulating platform, your brain reacts as if it is literally starving. The agitation you feel isn't because the text is boring, it's because your neurochemistry is screaming for a cheap, fast dopamine hit.
And this causes what the source text calls cognitive fragmentation. We lose the physical ability to hold complex thoughts in our working memory because our brain is completely conditioned to context switch every 10 seconds.
Working memory has a very limited capacity to begin with. When you train it to just dump its contents and load an entirely new context over and over again rapidly, you physically degrade your ability to engage in long-form synthesis. You literally lose the ability to connect a thought from page 1 to a thought on page 10.
It's a completely unequal fight. We're walking into this digital ecosystem with our Paleolithic brains, facing off against supercomputers designed to hack our deepest survival instincts.
We are bringing a knife to a laser fight. Most users enter this digital ecosystem with zero protective cognitive structures in place. Unless we recognize the architecture of the trap we are in, willpower alone will never ever be enough to maintain a daily spiritual practice.
Which pivots us perfectly to the solution. How do we fight back? How do we retie the camel when the rope is constantly being cut by our environment? The framework provided by our sources argues that the Islamic behavioral architecture is actually the ultimate long-term cognitive training system to counterbalance this modern chaos.
It is a brilliant system when viewed through this lens.
It breaks this down to 3 core concepts: stability, consistency, and persistence. Let's really analyze these, starting with stability.
The Arabic concept often translated as stability or steadfastness is istiqamah. In this context, it is defined as maintaining a clear, straight path despite internal desires, external pressure, or social volatility.
The steadfastness to just stay on the road.
Right. The framework cites historical examples like Bilal ibn Rabah, an early companion of the Prophet who endured extreme physical torture but refused to yield his core belief. It creates unbelievable psychological resilience.
Now, we obviously aren't facing that level of literal physical persecution in our daily lives today. So how does that historical concept map onto someone just trying to stop scrolling and read a book?
Because the modern persecution isn't physical. It's psychological and algorithmic. The attention economy constantly pressures you to adopt new opinions, outrage cycles, and consumer desires every single hour of every day.
It's exhausting.
It thrives on making your identity volatile. Stability in this framework produces profound psychological resilience against that. It creates a rigid core identity. When you have a non-negotiable spiritual anchor, like saying, I will recite this text for 30 minutes a day, regardless of what the trending topic is on Twitter, you build a psychological fortress against algorithmic manipulation. You stop being whatever the feed tells you to be that day.
You become unhackable.
Essentially, yes.
That makes sense as the foundation. Then we move to consistency. And this is where the classical texts directly contradict our modern go big or go home hustle culture. The texts heavily prioritize sustained, incredibly small actions over massive, isolated efforts. They quote the Prophet saying, "The most beloved deeds to Allah are those that are consistent, even if small."
This biological reality of habit formation brings us back to why consistency absolutely beats intensity. If you want to change your physical biology, lifting weights for 12 hours straight on a Saturday and then doing absolutely nothing for a month will only result in severe injury.
Yeah, you'd end up in the hospital.
But lifting weights for just 20 minutes every single day literally rebuilds your muscle fibers. The brain works the exact same way. Neural pathways are fortified through frequency, not just volume.
So reading one single page of the Quran every single day after the dawn prayer is neurologically and spiritually superior to trying to read 30 pages once a month in some random burst of motivation?
Absolutely superior. Motivation is an emotion, which means it is highly unreliable. Consistency builds discipline, which is an infrastructural structure. By mandating small, repeatable actions, the Islamic framework reduces the psychological chaos of relying on how you just happen to feel on any given day.
But let's be brutally honest here. We are going to fail. We are humans. We are going to miss days. We are going to fall into a TikTok hole for 3 hours and completely abandon our beautifully crafted reading plan.
It's inevitable.
That brings us to the third concept, persistence. What is the actual difference between consistency and persistence? Because they sound like synonyms.
They do, but they're very different. Consistency is the mechanism of taking daily steps on the path. Persistence is the psychological mechanism of what happens when you trip and fall entirely off the path. Persistence is the ability to commit mistakes, to confront your own undeniable weakness, and to quickly return to the baseline practice without falling into despair.
Without despair. That is the key phrase right there, isn't it? Because usually when we break a habit, the shame spirals out of control. We think, well, I ruined my 10-day streak. I'm a total failure. I might as well just give up entirely and eat a whole pizza.
Shame is incredibly paralyzing. The classical framework completely anticipates human frailty. It doesn't demand robotic perfection from you. It demands relentless return. The measure of success in this architecture isn't the total action, it is in itself a profound act of spiritual resilience.
I love how that just entirely shifts the pressure off the listener. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be persistent. So we have these 3 psychological pillars: stability, consistency, and persistence. But the framework goes deeper by actively interrupting the day using what it calls slow, structured rewards. And this is where the daily prayers come in.
The temporal distribution of the 5 daily prayers, dawn, noon, afternoon, sunset, and night, is not arbitrary at all. It creates an immovable, incredibly stable rhythm to the day.
I think about how easy it is to lose entire hours to the internet. You sit down at your desk at 2 p.m., you open one tab, and suddenly it's 5 p.m., it's getting dark, and you have no idea where the time went. The hours just bleed together.
That phenomenon is literally called time distortion, and tech platforms are explicitly designed to induce it. Casinos do the exact same thing by removing clocks and windows from the gaming floor.
Oh, wow, yeah.
The Islamic prayer system aggressively fractures that time distortion. Regardless of how deep into a consumption loop you are, the arrival of the prayer time forces a hard stop. You have to physically disconnect, you have to perform a physical purification with water, and engage in a slow, focused, non-digital act. 5 times a day, this architecture actively unplugs you from the dopamine machine and forces a cognitive reset.
The source material also connects this architecture to fasting, specifically tying it to the famous Stanford marshmallow experiment. Now, we've all heard the basic summary of that study, right? Kids who could wait to eat the marshmallow do better in life. But how does that actually connect to adult cognitive discipline?
The marshmallow experiment was fundamentally about the mechanics of delayed gratification and impulse control. It measured a child's ability to override an immediate primal desire, sugar, in favor of a larger abstract future reward. Fasting, particularly fasting for an entire month during Ramadan, is an intensive masterclass in this exact psychological mechanism.
Because you are overriding the most primal biological impulses possible: food and water.
Exactly. Your body is biologically screaming for hydration and calories. The impulse to eat is overwhelming. And yet, through sheer cognitive and spiritual framing, you train your brain to say, no, not yet. I'm delaying this gratification for a higher unseen purpose.
That's incredibly difficult.
It is. But when you spend 30 days successfully denying a fundamental biological impulse, denying the impulse to just check a notification on your phone suddenly becomes incredibly trivial by comparison. You have hypertrophied your impulse control muscles.
When you look at it through this lens, it's honestly mind-blowing. Religion isn't just a set of abstract beliefs or theological arguments. It is a highly integrated daily gym for your attention span and executive function. Prayer is the cognitive reset. Fasting is impulse control. Scripture reading is deep focused training.
It is a comprehensive behavioral architecture designed to create a very specific type of human being. One who is resilient, highly focused, and profoundly resistant to immediate gratification.
Okay, we understand the theory, we see the big picture, but how do we actually execute this? If someone is listening to this right now in their car or on their walk and they want to start tomorrow, how do they take these grand concepts, angels and camels and dopamine loops, and actually build a consistent habit in a world that is actively trying to destroy it?
The source material lays out 4 very practical, actionable strategies. Let's look at the first one. Reduce friction for discipline.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
This strategy is grounded entirely in behavioral economics. Human beings are energy-conserving organisms. We will almost always default to the path of least resistance. The text makes a hard, uncompromising point here. Willpower is a finite resource, and it will eventually fail you. You simply cannot rely on willpower to beat a billion-dollar algorithm. You have to rely on environmental design.
So if my phone is in my pocket and my Quran is on a dusty bookshelf in the guest room, I'm going to lose that battle every single time.
Every single time. The friction to read the book is high. You have to get up, walk over, find it. The friction to open the app is literally 0. It's already in your hand. You have to invert that dynamic. You must make the discipline easier to access than the distraction.
How does that look practically in someone's house?
It means manipulating your physical space aggressively. Place the physical text right on your pillow after you make your bed in the morning. When you go to sleep that night, you are forced to physically pick it up to get into bed. The friction is 0. Conversely, you must artificially increase the friction for distraction.
Put hurdles in the way.
Exactly. Charge your phone in a completely different room overnight. Delete the highest offending apps from your home screen so you have to use the clunky mobile browser to access them. The core rule of habit formation is make the right choice, the easy choice, and the wrong choice, the annoying choice.
That is brilliant. It takes all the moral weight off of the moment of decision. You don't have to be a superhero. You just follow the physical path you laid out for yourself.
Exactly.
The second strategy the source mentions is digital fasting. The text recommends defining specific blocks of time with absolutely no media exposure. It specifically targets the first hour after waking up and the last hour before sleep. Why those times?
There is profound neurobiology behind targeting those specific windows. Let's look at the morning first. When you are asleep, your brain operates primarily in delta waves. As you wake up, it transitions into theta waves, which is this highly relaxed, deeply suggestible state, and then eventually into alpha waves, which is alert but still calm.
So it's a very delicate biological transition.
Highly delicate.
Yeah.
If, during that theta or early alpha phase, you immediately grab your phone from the nightstand and open a high dopamine social feed, you instantly violently shove your brain into a high-frequency beta wave state. You flood a suggestible, vulnerable brain with stress hormones, social comparison, and variable rewards. You establish a frantic, reactive neurological baseline for the entire rest of your day.
Wow. You are essentially drinking cognitive poison before you've even had a glass of water.
Yes. And the evening window is equally critical. The blue light emitted by screens suppresses the pineal gland's production of melatonin, severely disrupting your circadian rhythm. Furthermore, the cognitive arousal from consuming content prevents the brain from naturally decelerating back down into the delta state you need for restorative sleep.
But let me push back here on behalf of the listener. For a lot of people, their jobs absolutely require them to be plugged in. Is a total digital fast in the morning actually realistic for a working adult?
It is entirely realistic if we stop viewing every email as a life or death emergency. Very few professions actually require an immediate response within the first 45 minutes of waking up. By actively guarding just the first hour and the last hour, you create a protected cognitive buffer zone. In this quiet, unhijacked state, a slow habit like Quranic recitation can actually take root because it isn't constantly competing with a dopamine flood.
That makes sense. That sets the stage for the third strategy, structured routines. The framework emphasizes that the mind craves predictable structure to reduce decision fatigue. Let's unpack decision fatigue because I think people really underestimate how physically tiring it is to just make choices all day long.
It is exhausting. Every single choice you make, what to wear, what to eat for breakfast, which lane to drive in, whether to check an email now or later, it consumes a tiny fraction of glucose in your brain. You have a finite reserve of executive functioning power every single day. If you wake up and have to decide if you're going to read, when you're going to read, where you're going to read, and how much you're going to read, you will exhaust your mental energy before you even open the cover.
You spend all your willpower just trying to coordinate the habit.
Exactly. Structured routines completely eliminate that friction by automating the decision entirely. If your rule is non-negotiable, like I sit in this specific green chair and recite for exactly 15 minutes immediately after the dawn prayer, there is no decision left to make. The environment and the temporal anchor pull you into the behavior automatically. The habit becomes infrastructural rather than motivational.
Which brings us to the final strategy, and honestly the one that sounds the most painful to me. Boredom tolerance training. Relearning how to read without interruption, think without devices, and work without constant stimulation.
It is painful, but the text identifies this as the ultimate cognitive superpower of our era. It aligns very closely with computer scientist Cal Newport's concept of deep work.
Oh, I've read that.
The ability to focus without distraction on a cognitively demanding task.
Newport argues that because so many people have essentially outsourced their attention spans to these algorithms, the economic and societal value of someone who can actually focus has just skyrocketed.
Precisely. The ability to sustain deep focus, to tolerate sheer boredom without immediately seeking a digital pacifier, is becoming a remarkably rare trait. If you can sit and focus on a complex text for even one unbroken hour, you possess a massive cognitive advantage over 90% of the population right now.
But let's get incredibly practical about that pain. I set up my environment, my phone is charging in the kitchen, I sit down in my chair with the Quran. 3 minutes in, my brain starts absolutely screaming for stimulation. It feels itchy, it feels unbearable. What do I actually do in that exact moment?
First, you have to correctly identify what that feeling actually is. That agitation is not a sign that the text is boring or that you are failing at being spiritual. That agitation is the physical symptom of dopamine withdrawal. It is your brain realizing that the slot machine has been unplugged and it is throwing a chemical temper tantrum.
I think we need a physical analogy for this to really help people get through it. Let's compare it to muscle fatigue. When you are lifting weights and you reach that point where your muscles start to burn intensely, you don't drop the weight and think, oh no, I'm injured, something is terribly wrong, I must stop immediately.
No, of course not. You recognize that the burn is the necessary biological mechanism for hypertrophy. The muscle only grows by tearing and repairing through that exact friction.
Right. So we have to treat that sudden wave of cognitive boredom, that intense, itchy craving to jump up and check our phones, exactly like the physical burn of a workout. It is the cognitive burn.
That is a perfect framing. When you feel that urge to check your phone and you acknowledge it, sit with it, and deliberately force your eyes back to the page, you are completing a mental push-up. You are actively strengthening the neural pathways of executive control. You are retying the camel.
Every moment of discomfort is literally just the feeling of your attention span getting stronger.
Yes. And the science of neuroplasticity tells us that over time, through consistency and persistence, that burn will eventually fade. Your dopamine baseline will reset to a healthy level. The slow reward system will reactivate. The recitation will transition from being this agonizing daily chore to becoming the very thing that stabilizes and anchors your day. You'll begin to finally experience the internal sweetness and the external fragrance that the classical metaphors promised at the very beginning of our discussion.
Let's pull all of these amazing threads together and just recap the incredible territory we've covered today. We started by exploring the profound spiritual rewards of daily recitation, looking at how classical texts used vivid socioeconomic and sensory metaphors, from the fragrance of sweet citrus to the immense.
Okay, I'm going to stop here to receive your questions. So please on the chat, if you have any question, you can go ahead, please. Seima.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته, sister.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
How are you, sister?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. I hope you're fine. I think you were the one who asked the question last time.
No, it was me. I wanted to ask, but I got stuck with my little one, so I couldn't. And I wanted to read as well, but never mind. Not today. Firstly, sister, I would like to highly congratulate you, mashallah, Mubarak. A very, very good lecture. I will be honest with you with this. AI conversation, I wasn't really paying attention. I'll be honest with you, because I didn't find my emotions being connected with this artificial thing. Maybe I'm a bit old fashioned, but when you were explaining, I knew that my teacher is a real physical person, and she's talking like me. You know what I mean? What I'm trying to say. So
Yes, I love that you mentioned that. Yes,
I engaged your conversation
much more.
more than this. It was just like playing with the toy. I think
Oh,
I
okay.
I know they were talking very beneficial, but I didn't. My mind didn't. Maybe because,
Yes,
sister,
yes.
I'm a bit old fashioned. I like
No,
to
no,
engage with real
no, it's
people.
not old-fashioned. This is how everybody looks at AI, as if it's something very artificial, and we're not
Yes,
related to it. And this is
yes,
something, as you said, you're playing some background music, even.
yes, yes,
You don't
yes.
consider it as beneficial. But to complete this part before you continue, with no telem, I'm going to go back and going to do the share. Okay. Okay. Go back to the screen. Okay. And this is our note-lm. Okay. When you choose, first of all, when I'm doing now the audio, where is the audio? Yes, this is the audio overview. You can go for a deep dive. Okay. And I made it long, and you can even make it a debate. Okay. This is one. Why do I need it? For me as a teacher. Okay. You also can add in what are the things I want to concentrate on. Okay. I could be concentrating on the recitation virtues. I want to relate it with the modern discipline because I want my students to feel a connection with this material and so on. So it keeps giving me suggestions, and I could choose through those suggestions what I want them to concentrate on. The idea is that when I was preparing my lesson today, I heard them first. Okay, I heard more than 2/3 of this. I got the ideas from them. Then I presented it with mine. Okay, my voice when I presented. Okay, this can be very beneficial for me as a presenter. So this is one place where you can use it. As a teacher, you hear it, you absorb the ideas because you're preparing, so your window of thought is open for any new ideas. You can put down notes, and once you're explaining for your students here, you begin explaining using some of these ideas, these good ideas that we're talking about. This is one. So once you are the one preparing the lecture, you will hear them more deep. Okay, now suppose you are a self-learner also. You are the one, you have an exam, and I want to work with this. I can ask it to make me a quiz out of this. Okay, so I could generate quizzes. I could talk with the chat. I could chat with the sources, like here. I could ask him, for example, why camels? Okay, I'm going to say why camels. Okay, whatever question pops in your mind, put it, and you will be talking to the sources why camels are present in these analogies. Okay, so you'll have a lot of information you can take from that. So when you are the one preparing the material, your mind will be open. You can chat with the resources, and I even ask questions here. Okay, so this is one. Two, if you're a self-learner, once more, during the chat, you will learn more, and you will be asking the studio to produce you quizzes, flashcards, and so on. You'll be answering them on set. You could summarize. You can make a mind map to visualize the information for you to understand it better. Okay, so you can use mind maps. So that engagement, that mental engagement, when you are presenting, if you use this tool, AI tool, it will be helpful for you. Okay, so that's number one of the question. What else? Seema, you can unmute.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Sister Jazakumullahu khairan, for your beautiful explanation. Okay, my second question is regarding engaging our students to Quran.
Mm.
So recently, I did come across with one of very knowledgeable sister. MashaAllah, Allahumma barik. She has done a lot of progression in terms of learning herself and through different resources, through different teachers, connecting to Quran. And MashaAllah, she's on, I think, very good level. But recently, she asked me a very valid question. I didn't have the correct answer. She said, even though I am a teacher myself of Tajweed, and I do obviously give my students assurance that learning Tajweed, as you mentioned, there are so many rewards like hadith and etc. But when it comes to apply on myself, especially when I'm on my down days, I cannot even force myself to read even one a page a day. As a teacher, I give so many lectures on benefits of reading Quran. But when I am, as a person, very very hurt by any reason with anyone, how can I engage myself with Quran? Because to me, everything looks that I am not getting anywhere. This Quran, I understand this is the talking when Allah is talking directly to you.
Oh,
But she felt very down on that day, and I don't know how to reassure her, because it's very hard to give advice to a person who I know that she knows a lot. You know what
okay.
I mean?
Yes, yes. This comes from the understanding of persistence, that's recovery. We all face this. And it's present in the Prophet's teaching that if everyone has ups and downs. بما معنى. I'm talking about the meaning, not the full hadith. I'm not aware. And if your downs is still with us, with the Quran and the Sunnah, you're okay. Okay, this is the main theme of the hadith. So those ups and downs are part of us as humans. They always happen. Okay. This is why in Islam we have a very, very, very good re-emerging down from the downs, going up once more through the istighfar, ikthar min istighfar, and going back quickly, okay, returning back quickly, and doing tawbah, okay. So these, when you want to talk to her what you tell yourself when you are in the same situation. What are the things that help you? By the way, when I was preparing this lecture, I was doing it for myself. I was serving myself by explaining it to let myself hear, because I'm still also not in the level that most people do. So I'm telling myself before even teaching you. And this is part of us as teachers. We help each other. Today I'm enthusiastic. I'm helping you when you're down. Tomorrow I'm down. You will be giving me back the good things that I told you to do. Okay, so this is persistence, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards persistence and allows us to do very quick recovery. We have the most excellent recovery system in the whole world. We have istighfar. That means that we are immediately knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had forgiven us what we have done. We have even al-afu, for we ask Allah al-afu. So even the other effects of dhanb on us are wiped away. And we have الرفعة when we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala أن يرفع درجاتنا. So using these three tools are what I use for myself. Those three things, understanding that I do istighfar, I do to ask Allah for al-afu, and then go emerge and ask Allah for rifa. Then immediately do something new. If you put it in a strong structure of daily habits, the fallback will be less. If you put it in the habits of after Fajr reciting, or the reciting before bed, or doing tahajjud, if you put it in that system of consistency, you will begin you will not go down. You will be more consistent. You will be more regular. Okay. But once you have those downfalls, go, and persistence will give you the recovery.